In the last episode, Toyotomi Hideyoshi embarked on his final campaign, which ended in the destruction of the Hojo clan and the pacification of the North. In the end, leading to his total domination of the land. Finally, at long last, concluding the wars that had been plaguing Japan for over 100 years. Yet now, with the land united under his sword, Hideyoshi's ambition will continue to grow. In the year 1590, the later Hojo clan, who had dominated the Kanto plains for over half a century, were snuffed out by Toyotomi Hideyoshi at the siege of Odawara. Their fall meant the virtual collapse of any resistance going forward for Hideyoshi. The North, fractured and divided, would never unite to stand against him, as we have already seen in the previous episode when clans such as the Date and Nanbu had already pledged themselves to the Toyotomi cause. This meant that from all the way in the north to all the way down to the shores in the south, all bowed to one man, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Victory was his, and Japan was at last unified. But what now? In a perfect world, the samurai might have settled down into their domains as Hideyoshi established a strong central government to ensure the stability of the nation for years to come. Peace would reign supreme. Yet that would be just a dream. By 1590, after Japan had been at war for over 100 years, peace was a lie. The one question that would have been at the forefront of Hideyoshi's mind was how could he keep this from ever happening again? How could he ensure Japan would never slip back into such a chaotic and disastrous period of incessant war? Although there could have been many steps taken to slowly transition the country into a strong and stable nation, Hideyoshi opted for another path, an idea that had been given to him by none other than his predecessor, Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga had been just as ambitious a daimyo as any other daimyo of the age had been. However, the key difference that separated Nobunaga from the rest was that his countless victories through his strategic genius gave him an aura of invincibility. Perhaps Nobunaga even came to some wild conclusion that there was some divine reason behind his destiny. Whatever the case, at times he began speaking of his dream to one day invade the mainland and lay claim to China. Wishing to conquer such a vast portion of Asia has to be by far one of the most ambitious dreams that any world leader had ever sought, rivaling that of Napoleon, Alexander the Great, and Genghis Khan. Unfortunately, as we know, Nobunaga was betrayed and assassinated in 1582, paving the way for Hideyoshi to become his successor. This dream now rested with him, and although Hideyoshi had great ambition himself, it becomes hard to truly understand just how much ambition he actually had for an invasion of the mainland. As we know, over time, throughout Hideyoshi's campaigns that unified the country, his ego did grow quite substantially, and there were many who would say that he would have no doubt dreamt of a mainland conquest. What it comes down to, however, is simply what weighed heavier on his mind as an actual reason for why he would invade. Would the reason be forced by his own genuine ambition, or perhaps a more practical reason? Whatever the case, this was not a question Hideyoshi had to think of just yet. Right after the death of Nobunaga, at this point in time his first order of business was uniting Japan. At least until he finally came face to face with a growing dilemma. As great as he was, and as powerful as his regime had become, there was a looming threat over his head regarding the future of his family. This is something that is directly intertwined with the future peace and stability of the nation following the unification of Japan. If the Toyotomi regime remained incredibly powerful and unquestioning, a long-lasting peace would be confirmed. The problem for Hideyoshi was that his clan appeared to have a troubled future. Not until 1589 did Hideyoshi actually have a son born to him. Before this, the future of his family lay in adoptions he had made, bringing in prominent samurai from other families, often done for diplomatic reasons. For as we know, Hideyoshi won his wars and his battles through diplomacy almost more than actual conquest. Yet, going back all the way to 1586, we can start to see Hideyoshi beginning to panic. Perhaps an invasion of the mainland could be justified for the survival of the Toyotomi name, not necessarily as simply a campaign for glory. It was in that very year that he began to get the ball rolling on this idea, as he ordered the further expansion of a navy, a vast fleet that he could use to carry his armies across the seas into new conflicts. And although around that time we can maybe say that this navy was meant for his war against the Shimazu of Kyushu, what happened a year later confirms exactly where Hideyoshi's mind was at. In 1587, a reconnaissance force of 26 ships were dispatched to the Korean peninsula, the logical place in which a general invasion of the mainland would commence. They returned with news of the Korean military strength and possible landing locations, all of which illustrated to Hideyoshi just how ill-prepared Korea was for an actual attack. But being the diplomat that he was, it was said that after this reconnaissance mission in 1587 that he may have even reached out to Korea in aims to see if they would let him have free passage to China, a request that they did not reply to. Either way, for a time he would just sit with this information. First things first, Hideyoshi still had to finish unifying Japan. The birth of his son Tsurumatsu in 1589 changed everything. With a legitimate line of succession secure, perhaps Hideyoshi need not invest Japan into a war with China and Korea. With a son, his line was secure and the Toyotomi could continue to reign indefinitely. His legacy and that of his family was safe. To this end, after Japan was unified, by the 8th month of 1591, Hideyoshi issued a new edict which aimed to further pacify the land and increase future stability over Japan's many provinces. This edict would be the freezing of social class order, a move which worked to ensure that no one in Japan could freely move between the life they were born into. As we know, up to this point, the Ashigaru, peasant foot soldiers, were able to, through service, advance their status to that of a samurai, essentially graduating into nobility. Thus was the case for Hideyoshi himself, seeing as how he too was born into humble origins. And although this freezing of status was evident across all classes throughout feudal Japan, we can see mostly that it was aimed at just the inner workings of the samurai class. The Sengoku Jidai was known for all sorts of upstarts and betrayals, seizures of power which worked to continually upend the established order. In many cases we refer to this as Gekukujo, the lower toppling the higher. And it was this very action that gave birth to the Sengoku daimyo, lords who arose from lesser status to become powerful, ambitious figures. That needed to stop, and any possible way of doing so closed off. No more could a samurai rise above his rank and lord. All must be loyal to their family. All must be loyal to their daimyo. And each daimyo loyal to the Kanpaku, Hideyoshi himself. And of course, to further this, no more could peasants have delusions of grandeur either. There needed to be an established order that was carved into stone. This was 100% something that needed to happen in order to ensure that the chaos which had previously gripped Japan never returned with such a vengeance. This edict freezing social order would have been a fine first step on the road to forging a new, stable Japan at peace. Yet, unfortunately, a gradual transition into peace would never come. Sadly, in that very same year, Tsurumatsu, Hideyoshi's firstborn son, died in infancy. The future of the Toyotomi family was once again called into question. However, things were obviously different now than they had been in the mid-1580s. Japan was at peace now, and unified under the Toyotomi banner. But without an heir, how long was this peace to last after Hideyoshi's death? Was his clan to fall apart again and the wars resumed? What would it all have mattered? Perhaps he could turn the attention of Japan away from his family, thus ensuring their survival. Once again, his thoughts found their way to the mainland. Investing the many daimyo and samurai armies of Japan into a new war against China and Korea would have paved the way for stability at home, or so it was believed. With each daimyo's attention focused on the war throughout the mainland and their armies away, there would have been most likely no way for anyone to challenge the authority of the Toyotomi back home in Japan. The central regime Hideyoshi had worked to build up would continue on indefinitely, especially with new territorial claims on the mainland that could be further rewarded to those who took part in the war, thus incentivizing loyalty to the Toyotomi. At this point in time, Hideyoshi was 54 years old, with his health finally showing signs of deteriorating after a long life filled with wars and campaigns. If he was to have any chance at saving his clan and ensuring Japan stays united, he would need to strike quickly. Now, it is important to ask just how realistic an ambition this was. Was Japan actually strong enough to conquer both China and Korea? Well, yeah. The military strength of Japan by the time Hideyoshi unified the country in 1590 would have been supreme for many reasons. The country had just been in a conflict with itself for over 100 years. The only thing people knew was war. The samurai and the ashigaru were all military veterans who had seen countless battles and were at peak performance and discipline, with samurai generals having a lifetime of experience to call upon. There was an excess of military equipment as well, with thousands of spears, swords, and top-of-the-line firearms readily available for battle. Japan did not lack in terms of military advancements and technology whatsoever, not to mention the millions of manpower that Japan could call upon to serve. All of this has led to many historians considering Japan by the end of the Sengoku Jidai to be the most powerful force militarily in all of Asia, while some others have even gone so far as to say at this point in time, Japan had the strongest military in the entire world. But looks can be deceiving. Although Japan appears to have one of the greatest militaries by the 1590s, the many samurai clans under Hideyoshi had yet to all fight together in unison, while many campaigns had been waged involving many daimyo in the past. What would a new war look like now? What egos, ambitions, and rivalries would come out on a fresh field of battle? That had yet to be seen. A new war was on the horizon, that much was for sure. Not in Japan, but abroad. With the survival of his family and the future stability of the nation on the line, Hideyoshi's eyes were now focused entirely on the mainland. So, what can we learn? In 1590, Japan was unified by Toyotomi Hideyoshi after the siege of Odawara. Yet now a new dilemma came before him. How to preserve the peace and stability of the nation, as well as ensuring his family continued to reign over the land for generations to come. Going back to the mid-1580s, we can see that this question was already on the mind of Toyotomi Hideyoshi as he began to adopt his predecessor's idea of invading China. Not necessarily as a means to conquer all of Asia, but instead as a means to ensure the survival of his own family. The birth of his son Tsurumatsu in 1589 led to that idea being temporarily shelved. This would allow Hideyoshi to pursue other avenues of preserving the peace, such as the freezing of social order in 1591. Unfortunately, in that same year, Tsurumatsu would die, leading to Hideyoshi once again focusing all attention on a new war with China and Korea. In the next episode, the Imjin War begins, as Hideyoshi moves forward with his plans to invade the mainland. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most informative.